You've probably pictured it before without even meaning to. Somebody in your family dies, you're standing in a showroom, and there's a wall of caskets in front of you. Wood and steel and satin lining, price tags that make your stomach drop. Somewhere in the back of your head, a thought shows up. Whoever makes these things must be printing money. Everybody dies eventually, the demand never stops. That's the picture. Here's the problem with it. You never actually meet the person who made the casket. You meet the funeral director. The manufacturer is a name stamped quietly on the inside of the lid, 3 or 4 steps removed from the transaction that just cost your family $8,000. And that gap between who makes it and who sells it is the entire business model you'd be signing up for. You think this is a business built on grief being universal. It's actually a business built on distribution, on who gets to stand in the room with a family at the worst moment of their life. And if that's not you, you're just the factory in the back, selling boxes to the person who actually controls the money. The other thing nobody mentions before you get in is that the market you think you're entering isn't the market that actually exists anymore. Cremation has overtaken burial as the majority choice for American families, and that number climbs every single year. A lot of cremations don't involve a casket at all, or involve a cheap rental unit instead of a purchased one. So you're not stepping into a flat, guaranteed, recession-proof market. You're stepping into a shrinking one. And the entire question of whether this business works for you depends on whether you understand that going in. Because most people who chase this industry are still picturing the market from 30 years ago. Let's talk about what it actually takes to get in, because this isn't a business you start in a garage with a table saw and a dream. A functional casket manufacturing operation needs real industrial space, somewhere between 8,000 and 20,000 square feet depending on whether you're running wood, steel, or both product lines. And that alone runs you $40,000 to $60,000 a year in lease costs before you've produced a single unit. Then comes equipment. Wood casket production needs woodworking machinery, finishing booths, upholstery stations for interior lining. Steel production needs stamping presses, welding equipment, paint, and plating lines. A lean but legitimate setup for one product line runs $300,000 to $500,000 in equipment alone. Run both wood and steel under one roof, and you're closer to $700,000 to $1 million just in machinery. Then there's inventory, and this is where new owners consistently blow their cash projections. You can't build to order in this business. Death doesn't run on a production schedule, and funeral homes expect same-day or next-day fulfillment. That means casket-grade lumber, steel stock, interior fabric, hardware, all of it has to sit finished on your shelves at all times ready to ship. For a small operation, that's realistically $150,000 to $300,000 of standing inventory before you've made a dollar back. Add licensing, manufacturing permits, and liability insurance, which runs unusually high in this industry because of the emotional and legal weight attached to the product, and total startup capital lands somewhere between $450,000 and $900,000 for a credible operation. Not a side hustle number. A small industrial plant number, because that's what it actually is. Here's the mistake that quietly kills new entrants in this specific industry, and it has nothing to do with the manufacturing itself. It's the sales runway. Funeral homes don't switch suppliers easily. A lot of them have relationships with the same distributor going back decades, sometimes generational, tied to trust built over years of reliable delivery during the worst weeks of families' lives. Getting a funeral home to even test your product can take 6 to 12 months of relationship building. Getting them to move meaningful order volume to you takes another year on top of that. If you don't have 12 to 18 months of overhead sitting in reserve on day one, you'll run dry before those relationships mature enough to generate real revenue. Not 5 to 7 months, 12 to 18. That gap is exactly where undercapitalized manufacturers fold, usually somewhere in year 2. Right when the sales pipeline was finally about to pay off. Now here's the part of this business that actually flips your intuition upside down. The 2-number comparison that explains where the real money sits. Picture your product catalog. On one end, a solid mahogany casket, bronze hardware, hand-finished interior, wholesaling to the funeral home around $2,200, which they'll turn around and sell the family for $8,000 to $12,000 retail. That's the piece that looks like your crown jewel, big number, feels prestigious, feels like where the real profit lives. On the other end, a plain 18-gauge steel casket, no ornamentation, basic interior, wholesaling around $600. Looks like filler. Looks like the bottom shelf of your catalog. The math says otherwise. That mahogany piece takes 14 to 18 hours of skilled labor between the woodworking, finishing, and upholstery work. At a fully loaded labor rate around $35 an hour, that's $500 to $630 in labor cost alone, stacked on top of hardwood material prices that have climbed steadily for years. Your margin on that flagship wood casket typically lands around 20 to 25% once labor and material are accounted for. The plain steel casket takes maybe 2.5 to 3 hours of largely mechanized stamping and assembly, uses cheap gauge steel purchased in bulk, and because the process is automated rather than handcrafted, your margin on that unglamorous box runs 40 to 45%. Nearly double the margin on the product nobody notices. And because basic steel caskets are the single highest volume category funeral homes order, that boring $600 item, multiplied across hundreds of units a month, generates more total profit than your entire premium wood line combined. The flashy product sells the brand. The boring product runs the business. Let's follow $100 of wholesale revenue from a basic steel casket sale straight to your pocket, because this is where the real economics finally show themselves. A funeral home orders that casket for $100, keeping the math clean and scalable. Raw materials, the steel, interior fabric, hardware, run about $28. Direct labor for stamping, welding, assembly, and inspection takes another $18. Freight is brutal in this industry because caskets are large, heavy, and expensive to ship even regionally, running $12 to $15 per unit. Facility overhead, your lease, utilities, and equipment depreciation spread across monthly output, comes to roughly $10. Sales and account management, the reps maintaining funeral home relationships and chasing new accounts, run about $8 once annualized. Insurance and liability, non-negotiable and expensive given the emotional and legal stakes, add another $5. Administrative overhead, bookkeeping, compliance, general operations, takes $4 more. Add it up, 28 plus 18 plus 13 plus 10 plus 8 plus 5 plus 4, that's $86 gone before you've paid yourself anything. What's left is around $14 on every $100 of wholesale revenue, 14%. Not the $8,000 retail price the grieving family paid the funeral home. 14 cents on the wholesale dollar is what actually lands in your pocket. And that's before owner compensation. Now the hidden trap. And this one is specific to this industry, not a generic small business risk. It's customer concentration, but with a particular shape to it. Funeral homes have consolidated hard over the past 2 decades. A small number of large corporate chains now control a significant share of funeral homes nationally, and those chains negotiate centralized purchasing contracts. Land a contract with a regional or national chain, and your revenue can spike overnight. It feels like the business has arrived. But that same chain can renegotiate terms, switch suppliers, or get absorbed by an even bigger chain with its own preferred vendor. And your revenue can vanish just as fast as it appeared. It's common for independent casket manufacturers to have one account representing 30, 40, even 60% of total revenue, simply because a single chain's volume dwarfs fragmented independent orders. When that account leaves, and eventually one does, you're not just losing a customer, you're losing the entire cost structure you built around that volume. The trap doesn't look like a trap while it's happening. It looks like growth. It only becomes visible the month after the contract ends, when your overhead is still sized for revenue that's no longer arriving. Let's run the same top-line number 2 different ways, because this is where ownership skill actually separates outcomes. Say your company does $3 million in annual wholesale revenue. Run it poorly, and materials cost sits around 32% of revenue because of sloppy purchasing with no bulk contracts. Labor runs 22% because of overtime and inefficient scheduling. Freight sits at 14% from unconsolidated shipments. Facility and equipment costs run 11%. Sales and admin combined hit 14%. Insurance and miscellaneous take 5%, Total spend lands around 98% of revenue, leaving just 2%, roughly $60,000, in actual profit on $3 million of sales. That's a business working itself to exhaustion just to survive. Run that same $3 million through a tightly optimized operation, and the picture transforms. Materials drop to 26% through negotiated bulk steel and lumber contracts. Labor drops to 17% through disciplined scheduling and reduced overtime. Freight drops to 9% by consolidating shipments and locking in regional carrier rates instead of paying spot pricing. Facility costs hold around 9%, sales and admin drop to 10% through better systems rather than just more headcount. Insurance and miscellaneous hold around 4%. Total spend comes in around 75%, leaving 25%, roughly $750,000, in profit on the exact same $3 million of revenue. Same market, same volume, same headwinds. The difference between $60,000 and $750,000 is pure operational discipline. And that gap is the real test of whether you can actually run this business or just own it. Zoom out for a second, because there are three forces reshaping this industry right now that most people never factor in before buying in. Cremation rates have crossed the majority threshold nationally and keep climbing every year, which structurally shrinks the total addressable market for traditional caskets over time. At the same time, direct-to-consumer online casket retailers have started cutting into the traditional wholesale to funeral home pipeline, selling straight to families at a fraction of funeral home markup, which chips away at the pricing power that funeral homes, and by extension their suppliers, used to hold. And funeral home consolidation shows no signs of slowing. Large chains keep acquiring independents, which means the buyer side of this market keeps concentrating into fewer, larger, more leverage-heavy accounts every year. None of these three forces existed at this intensity a generation ago. All three are accelerating right now, at the same time, which is a rare and specific kind of pressure for any manufacturer to sit inside. So think back to where this started. You pictured a guaranteed, recession-proof business because death is guaranteed. It's actually a business about who controls the relationship with the family and who owns distribution in a shrinking, consolidating category. The steel and the hardwood don't make you money. The building doesn't make you money. What actually makes you money is whether you can lock in durable relationships with funeral homes before the chains consolidate further, and whether you can run lean enough to survive on wholesale margins that were never generous to begin with. Walk in thinking you're selling comfort to grieving families, and you'll be disappointed, because you'll rarely meet them. Walk in understanding you're running a lean industrial operation servicing a shrinking, consolidating B2B customer base, and you actually have a real shot at making it work. The honest verdict is that this can be a genuinely profitable business, but only under specific conditions. Real manufacturing capital, patience for a relationship-building runway that runs longer than most people expect, and a cost structure built for a contracting market rather than an expanding one. Hit all three, and there's a real 14 to 25% margin business waiting on the other side. Miss any one of them? And you'll find out the hard way why so many small casket makers don't survive past year 3. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, stick around and subscribe. It actually helps this channel keep making them. And I'll catch you in the next one.